The grand courtroom was packed. Rows of wooden benches were filled with attorneys, journalists, and spectators, their murmurs creating an ambient hum of anticipation. The air was thick with formality and the unspoken weight of power. At the helm of it all sat Judge Ronald Mercer, a man whose reputation loomed large over the city's legal community. Judge Mercer had presided over cases for more than 2 decades, his presence alone enough to make attorneys tread carefully. He was known not just for his legal acumen, but for his unchecked arrogance and, more controversially, his history of making racially charged comments from the bench. Whispers of misconduct and corruption had followed him for years, but nothing had ever stuck. He wielded his authority like a weapon, confident that no one could ever bring him down. As the proceedings commenced, a woman stood near the front of the courtroom, her posture poised and unwavering. She was the very picture of professionalism. Dressed in a tailored navy suit, her hair neatly styled, her expression unreadable. But there was something about her presence that commanded attention, a quiet strength that did not need to be spoken. Her name was Alana Davis. To those who did not know her, she might have seemed like just another legal professional. But for those aware of the undercurrents swirling beneath this trial, they would know that Alana was far more than she appeared. She had spent years working in the legal system, and in recent months, she had been part of something far greater, a covert investigation into the very judge now sitting before her. As the case proceeded, Judge Mercer leaned forward, adjusting his glasses with an air of exaggerated impatience. His voice carried the weight of authority, but beneath it lay a familiar condescension. "This is a waste of the court's time," he said, waving a dismissive hand. "Let's move along before we're all stuck here listening to pointless arguments." And then it happened. A moment of silence stretched across the courtroom as the judge, with his usual arrogance, directed an offhand, blatantly racist remark at Alana Davis. His words hung in the air like a poisonous cloud, their impact immediate and suffocating. The room froze. The hum of quiet conversation ceased. Even the attorneys who had been busily preparing their next remarks stopped mid-motion, stunned into stillness. A few people exchanged uneasy glances, while others simply looked down, unsure of how to react. Alana, however, did not move. She stood as she had before, calm, composed, her expression betraying nothing. She did not flinch, did not react with anger or shock. Instead, she met the judge's gaze with a look that was almost patient, as if she knew something he did not. The judge, emboldened by the silence, smirked ever so slightly, believing himself untouchable as always. But what Judge Mercer failed to realize was that his reign of unchecked power was already over. For months, Alana and a dedicated team of investigators had been working behind the scenes, meticulously compiling evidence against him. Corruption, bribery, abuse of power. Judge Mercer had indulged in it all, convinced that his status placed him beyond consequence. He had taken money in exchange for favorable rulings, pressured attorneys into silence, and used his influence to manipulate the justice system to his benefit. Alana had been instrumental in building the case against him. She had worked tirelessly, ensuring that every detail was documented, every piece of evidence airtight. And now, as she stood in this courtroom, the very place where Mercer had ruled with impunity for years, she knew that justice was mere moments away. Exactly 7 minutes after the judge's offensive remark, the heavy wooden doors of the courtroom swung open with a resounding creak. A team of law enforcement officers stepped inside. Their presence was immediate and undeniable. The murmurs in the room escalated into whispers of confusion, and all eyes turned toward the unexpected interruption. The officers moved with a sense of purpose, their expressions unreadable, but their intent unmistakable. Judge Mercer frowned, clearly caught off guard. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, his voice tinged with irritation rather than concern. He was a man used to having control, and the idea that someone might challenge him in his own courtroom was to him laughable. But then, Alana stepped forward. She held in her hand an official document, a warrant, its crisp edges an undeniable testament to the weight of the law. "Judge Ronald Mercer," she said, her voice steady, her tone unyielding. "You are under arrest for corruption, bribery, and abuse of judicial power." A stunned silence filled the room. The judge's smirk vanished. His expression twisted from confusion to disbelief, then quickly to anger. He leaned forward, his hands gripping the edge of his desk as though he could physically hold onto his authority. "This is absurd," he barked. "I am the judge here. You have no right." Alana didn't flinch. "The warrant has been signed, Judge Mercer. The evidence is overwhelming, and the law does not discriminate, even against those who once believed themselves above it." The judge sputtered, his face reddening. "This is a mistake, a misunderstanding. I demand to speak to." But his demands fell on deaf ears. The officers stepped forward, their movements precise and efficient. They reached for his wrists, their grip firm as they pulled them behind his back and secured the cold, unyielding metal of handcuffs around them. The courtroom watched in stunned silence. It was a surreal moment. This man, who had spent years presiding over others, now standing as a defendant in his own domain. Some people exchanged knowing glances. Others simply sat frozen, unable to process the sudden reversal of power. The judge struggled, still grasping at any shred of authority he could muster. "You're making a mistake," he shouted, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. "This will never stand." Alana met his gaze one last time. There was no gloating, no triumph in her expression, just a quiet, resolute certainty. "This is justice," she said simply. The officers led the judge toward the exit. The murmurs in the room grew, some watching in approval, others in stunned silence. The balance of power had shifted irrevocably, and the fall of a once untouchable figure was now unfolding before them. As the judge was escorted out, the weight of the moment settled over the courtroom. Beyond these walls, the repercussions would ripple outward. The case would make headlines, discussions would ignite about corruption in the legal system, and the message would be clear. No one, not even those who sit in judgment, are above the law. Alana exhaled slowly, allowing herself a brief moment of reflection. She had spent years working toward this, ensuring that justice was not just an abstract ideal, but a reality. And today, standing in the very courtroom where power had so often been abused, she had proven that justice was not blind to those who thought themselves untouchable. As she turned to leave, the echoes of the moment lingered. This was not just the end of Judge Mercer's reign. It was the beginning of something greater. Justice had spoken, and it had been heard. Would you like to hear a story like this? Don't forget to subscribe and follow for more.